This is VOA Africa. Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory in for #TheYourt. It's Friday, August the 16th. This is Africa 54. The rights group sounds the alarm on child labor in Zimbabwe. The female politicians and feminists pushing for more representation in Sudan. And a look back at the legacy of the dancehall superstar DJ Arafat. And we begin in Southern Africa, where Zimbabwe's deteriorating economy has families struggling to put food on the table. Many say they are forced to put their children to work. Child rights activists say they're seeing an increasing number of children selling items on the streets to help their families make ends meet. Columbus Mavunga has our report.
This 16-year-old says she has been working as a vendor since her mother died 2 years ago, forcing her to drop out of school. She lives with her 22-year-old sister and earns about $5 a day from her sales.
I do not want to sell stuff here, but I felt I could not force my dad to pay my school fees as he is no longer employed. He is even failing to pay fees for my 12-year-old brother, which I am now doing. I hope my brother makes it in life.
Zimbabwe's Health and Child Welfare Minister, Obadiah Moyo, says the government is working with organizations like UNICEF and charities like Childline to help poor children. Childline says it has seen more children being forced to work as Zimbabwe's economy deteriorates.
But now with the economic challenge, you can imagine in one community where a child has to go and sell maputi, for instance, and they don't bring back any income because nobody bought from them. Then the parent will then reward those who sold with food, and the one who didn't sell, because you didn't bring any money home, so how do you expect to eat? So we're now engaging with parents that you shouldn't punish children by withdrawing food.
In Zimbabwe now, fewer children are able to go to school. Many are like this young girl who has to work to help support her 12-year-old brother and her unemployed father. Columbus Mavunga for VOA News, Harare.
Well, Zimbabwe police fired tear gas and beat up scores of opposition supporters gathered in Harare on Friday. The clashes came as authorities moved to enforce a ban on anti-government demonstrations. Earlier this week, the High Court upheld that protest ban. Friday's demonstrations would have been the first in a series of nationwide protests organized by the Opposition Movement for Democratic Change. The MDC accuses President Emmerson Mnangagwa's government of state-sponsored violence, corruption, and economic mismanagement. For more perspective on the situation in Zimbabwe, Dewa Mavinga, the Director for Human Rights Watch in Southern Africa, joins me live from Johannesburg, South Africa. Dewa, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you for having me on the show. Thank you.
Yeah, so first let's talk about this ban on protests. Is this something new?
Well, it's very worrying considering that we were supposedly under a new dispensation. So it's quite disturbing that the courts are moving to curtail the rights of citizens, especially when there are these dire economic challenges that need to be highlighted. And also what happened in Harare this morning, the brutality by the police, unprovoked and mitigated, where they used excessive force to beat up protesters who were peaceful and unarmed. That is uncalled for, unacceptable, and should be punished by law.
And let's look at the state of the nation. Are people legitimately, protesting? I mean, how is the government doing in dealing with some of these challenges it's facing?
Well, the people's concerns are very legitimate. Zimbabwe has become one of the most expensive countries to live in across Africa. there is abject poverty. People cannot afford basics. A loaf of bread costs more than $10. There is no fuel. There are electricity cuts in excess of 18 hours a day. So these are dire circumstances that the government is failing to address, and especially at a time when this new government of Mnangagwa had promised that this would be a new dispensation and that they would do better than what had happened under former President Mugabe. So we are faced with serious challenges. The government is broke. It has no money. There is endemic corruption. And in all this, instead of addressing the legitimate concerns by citizens, the government chooses to use brute force and to be heavy-handed and to ignore the genuine concerns of its citizens.
Now, the opposition leader, Nelson Chamisa, said that they don't want to see blood on the streets, that they will change tactics henceforth. What options are there for them?
Well, one clear option is to continue to push for the rights of citizens to be respected through peaceful protests that are enshrined in the Constitution, and also to ensure that Zimbabwe listens, the leadership listens through continued, perhaps, stairways, sit-ins, anything that shows that things are not well, but at the same time protect citizens from the violence of the police and the army. So they need to perhaps stay indoors, but continue to speak out and say, it cannot be business as usual in Zimbabwe. Things are not well. Mnangagwa and this government need to listen to the people of Zimbabwe and to find solutions together. There is need for a genuine process of national dialogue to take Zimbabwe forward.
Well, Dewa, we do appreciate your insights. Dewa Mavinga is the Director for Human Rights Watch in Southern Africa. He was speaking to us from Johannesburg. Now, Zimbabwe's economic crisis is pushing many to look for economic opportunities in neighboring Botswana, where authorities say they are battling to deal with an influx of illegal immigrants. Mkondisi Dube reports from Gaborone.
Prosper Kandanamo and Thomas Kundani left Zimbabwe and entered Botswana illegally because of the moribund economy in their homeland.
I came into Botswana because back to my home in Zim, there are no job opportunities.
The two are among the many illegal immigrants from Zimbabwe who line the streets of Gaborone looking for odd jobs. But they are an unwelcome sight for authorities and subject to frequent police raids. The number of Zimbabweans arrested and deported in Botswana rose from 22,000 in 2015 to nearly 29,000 in 2018. Kanda Namo, an accountant, says they are often caught.
It's better for you to be caught by the police. You know, at the cells, they will give you food, they will give you transport to the border, they deport you, then you find your way back here than to go back to Zim.
Kundani, a painter, says they would rather risk arrest than return to face hardship in Zimbabwe.
We just have to come back. The situation here, it's a bit difficult. It's difficult for us, but as compared for the situation in Zimbabwe, it's more worse.
Botswana citizens say illegal immigrants contribute to rising crime and are demanding a solution.
Now turn back today, tomorrow they're here because there's nothing to hide. There's nothing they can put them to stay back where you are taking them. Always they will come here because they know that there's a fruit here. Illegal immigration will persist as long as Zimbabwe's economic crisis is not addressed, says Gaborone-based analyst Lawrence Oketitse.
For so long as economic and other opportunities are not quite there, people are going to move and you can't stop them from moving. It's not a nice thing to go through a border hunted with guns and all those things, but if you see people doing this, then it says to you that the cost of doing it is actually higher than the cost of staying.
Botswana spends about $100,000 a year deporting Zimbabwean illegal immigrants. Mkondisi Dube for VOA News, Gaborone.
Elsewhere, women played a central role in the protests that led to the oust of Sudan's Omar al-Bashir. They also a vital part in demonstrations that followed his downfall. And many of those women now say they feel locked out of the political agreements and don't expect to be named to any positions in the regional council. In Khartoum, Isha Sarai and Naba Mohideen spoke with female politicians and feminists who are pushing for better representation.
women in Sudan have been protesting, often in greater numbers than their male counterparts, since April. But many now feel their concerns are being ignored after helping to overthrow former President Omar al-Bashir.
In most of the protests, there were more women than men. Even the majority of the detainees were women. But now, there is an absence of real representation for women. For me, as a feminist, I'm not seeing feminists who can represent me in the government. They are women, but they don't represent women's issues.
Many women are represented in the Sudanese Professionals Association, or SPA, one of the main labor unions behind the opposition forces. But even they are not confident that they will adequately be represented in the transition government.
Women's representation in the decision-making process during the revolution was weak, or less than we had hoped. Our ambition was to have 50% representation in the government, or at least 40%. But this didn't happen.
The SPA acknowledges that women are not adequately represented, but a spokesman says fighting for equal representation in Sudan's government will simply take time.
Women should also fight individually for their right to representation. We will support them. In the SPA, we can work with feminist and civil society organizations to create a system that will work for everyone.
While many male leaders were in jail during protests earlier this year, women led the movement on the streets. But they say their efforts were not fully acknowledged when the men returned.
When they were released, for reasons I cannot understand, we were surprised the men were put back in leadership positions. I think it is because of the dominance of the patriarchal system that gave the men this feeling of privilege.
Coco and others say that the repression of women since the implementation of Sharia law in the 1980s has fueled their motivation to protest and demand more representation.
What Sudanese women have suffered for 30 years, politically, socially and economically, they have only suffered it since independence, and it's caused by the dominance of religious culture, the practice of the totalitarian ideology and the absence of freedoms.
Though a political agreement has been informally signed in Sudan, many women say they will not stop until their voices are heard.
Now, Sudan's military rulers and the main opposition coalition are expected to seal a power-sharing deal at a signing ceremony in Khartoum this Saturday. The two sides reached an agreement on August the 3rd on the shape of a transitional government. The deal is the result of lengthy negotiations following Omar al-Bashir's ouster in April. For more on what we can expect in coming days and months, our viewers Isha Sarai joins me live by phone from Khartoum. Good evening, Isha.
Good evening, Vincent.
Now, first, is there ever indication that actually this deal will be signed tomorrow?
Yes, as far as we can tell, the signing, from what I've heard, has been scheduled for 1 p.m. tomorrow, and there's very little doubt in the capital that it will happen.
Now, how are people reacting? What do they expect that should happen soon after that?
Well, it's a bit complicated. As you understand, this transitional government won't exactly be elected. They won't be holding elections for at least 3 years now. There are definitely complaints by protesters. There have been some small protests that have continued actually outside the opposition parties. And these protesters are saying that there has not been enough transparency in negotiation between the opposition and the Transitional Military Council. So they're calling for more transparency. But that being said, these protests are quite small. And generally, people are very happy that something is actually happening. And from other protesters, I've also heard that they're simply tired. As you know, the Sudanese people have been on the streets really since December. Yeah. So some kind of peace agreement is fully welcomed here.
Very quickly, though, on the streets of Khartoum, does it look like life has gone back to normal, somewhat?
Somewhat, yes. It's a bit hard to tell because Monday was Eid al-Adha. And really that holiday is celebrated all week in this Muslim nation. So the streets have, if anything, been a little bit emptier than normal, but there's really no indication of huge demonstrations or anything else.
Isha, excellent reporting, in fact. Thank you very much. That's a viewer, Isha Sarai, reporting from Sudan's capital, Khartoum. Well, we're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, remembering Ivorian dancehall legend DJ Arafat.
Shaka Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa.
Today we'll examine the tobacco industry.
We pretty much touch on anything that you can think of. Politics, health issues, human rights issues, you name it, we talk about it. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent. A very, very rare and unique opportunity to interact with their leaders.
The lyrics could be French,
English,
Portuguese,
Bantu,
Arabic.
It is the beat.
The African beat that counts.
The beat does all the translations.
It cuts across all languages and gives us the understanding that this is the African beat.
It is so distinct
and adhesive.
It binds us together.
African Beat on the Voice of America. For more information, visit our website at www.voanews.com/AfricanBeat.
I'm Clara Frank, and here's what's trending. With a thriving leather industry and cheap labor, Ethiopian shoes have stepped out into the international market over the past decade with exotic designs and high quality. And that's starting to seep back into the local market. Traditionally, most Ethiopian footwear exports were to Europe, but as the world's shoe companies discovered the business potential of the East African country, exports jumped from around $7 million in 2007 to $38 million in 2017. The United States has since become the biggest market. Now the Chinese are eyeing the industry and getting ready to build factories to supply Chinese and international markets. Next up, researchers in Singapore have invented smart clothing they say can boost signals and save battery life on wireless devices such as headphones and smartwatches. The invention, called metamaterial, allows radio waves like Bluetooth and Wi-Fi to glide across clothing between wearable devices instead of radiating outwards in all directions. This means sensors and wearable technology such as Apple Watches and AirPods can establish stronger connections faster and save energy. The textile can be washed, dried, and ironed like normal clothing and costs just a few dollars per meter to produce. And finally, motorized wheelchairs are traditionally controlled by a joystick or sensors attached to the user's body. But now, working in partnership with Intel, Brazil-based Hubox Robotics has created the Wheelie 7 with an AI leveraging kit that allows disabled people to control a motorized wheelchair through 10 facial expressions. Using an app, the user, with assistance from a caregiver, can assign which expressions are linked to the chair's movements. Through a combination of facial recognition software, sensors, robotics, and an Intel 3D RealSense depth camera that's been mounted to the wheelchair, Wheelie captures a 3D map of the face and uses AI algorithms to process data in real time to direct the wheelchair. And that's what's trending today.
Well, in 2015, the world adopted the Sustainable Development Goals or SDGs. 17 of the goals focus on improving health, welfare, and the environment by 2030. For more than 5 decades, the African Development Bank has promoted economic and social progress on the African continent. In a recent conversation with Africa 54's Lino Madu, Charles Bourma, Senior Vice President of the AFDB, explains the evolution of the bank's mission since it was founded in 1964.
There are some things that have remained constant. And so when you go back to why the bank was established, remember this was established in the early 60s, newly independent African states. There was a lot of need for to now work on our economic independence, so to speak, where the focus was on regional integration. And that remains very much a key focus of the bank, that to work such that African economies are more integrated. And so if we do a road corridor that links countries, it's part of that regional integration work that we do. The commitment to improve, for example, energy supply on the continent Without power, you're going nowhere, basically. So those are constant. But I think where it has evolved has been the increased attention to what we call the cross-cutting themes, which is, for example, gender. Significantly more attention is a critically important part of what we do, that everything we do must benefit all of Africans, women and men, with particular attention to areas where women are disadvantaged and trying to improve that gender, get to gender equality. There's also a lot of attention to climate. And in fact, our strategy, we commit to essentially transition to green growth. Social safeguards, for example, that's environmental safeguards. We also have, over the last few years, paid a lot of attention to issues of fragility. You know, there are many African countries that are going through conditions of fragility, sometimes wars, internal strife of some sort. They have particular needs to get out of situations of conflict into more stable state. And remember that these situations of conflict tend to also breed some of the undesirable things we see, people being attractive to be recruited into terrorist organizations, even the migration that we see trying to cross the desert, trying to cross the Mediterranean, are all born out of frustrations back home. And so the work we do, we believe very strongly, contributes significantly to basically preventing or at least reducing these undesirable effects. So that's how the work has evolved, but there are some common themes that I must say, and I think I mentioned them.
Yeah. Was Charles Boama, Senior Vice President of the African Development Bank. He spoke to Africa 54's Lina Mudu. And it's time for our entertainment segment, and joining us now is Music Time in Africa host Heather Maxwell. Hello, Heather. Tell us more about what you have for us today.
Hello. Thanks, Vincent. Hey, everyone. Happy Friday. The Francophone world of African music is mourning the death of Coupé Décalé superstar Ange Didier Wong, better known as DJ Arafat. He died on August 12th at the age of 33. I invited Roger Muntu, host of VOA's RM show, a popular French language music radio program, and we speak about DJ Arafat's life and his career, and then we send you off into your weekend with a fresh new music from the DRC. Okay, so Roger, this was one of DJ Arafat's most recent videos, Do Sabado, that came out last year.
Right.
And, well, now he is no more. DJ Arafat was probably the #1 living icon of this popular dance style from Côte d'Ivoire called Coupé Décalé. Now, you knew him personally, didn't you?
Yes, I knew him personally because Heather, he came, we had a privilege to have him coming here at Voice of America in Washington. He was one of the guests in my show when he came to see us. It was such a great thing to have this powerful young artist, you know, from the Francophone world.
So what was he like as a person, the time you spent with him?
Very good question. Very controversial person, I have to say that. Very. Like, he was very, he wanted to create, you know, buzz and, you know, create problems just so he can sell his music. Very happy kid, but very, you know, lots of energy.
Yeah.
I remember him coming here at VOA, Heather.
Yeah.
This is the only artist, and I'm telling you, you and I, as we know, we've welcomed so many artists in this building, but he's the only one I can tell you until today who came to VOA with 100 people behind him at the door. And the security had to call me, tell me, Roger, we cannot have 100 people come in this building. We only give you 15.
Well, it's funny that, it's ironic actually, that the video and the song that launched DJ Arafat into his career was about a friend of his who also died in a motorcycle accident, which is how DJ Arafat died.
Exactly, which is DJ Arafat died. We also didn't mention that, but I'm glad you're saying that because DJ Arafat died
on Monday,
in the middle of the night, where he decided to ride his motorcycle. The motorcycle was his life. This kid started riding motorcycle, he was, 15. He lived for a motorcycle. Beside music, I can say motorcycle was his thing. If there was no music, motorcycle. So that's all he knew. So, and as you said, that's ironic that he died not motorcycle. And there are videos also in social media, him saying, I would die one day in motorcycle. There are videos of that. But the video you're talking about, yeah, this is the video that helped him launch his career. As you just said, it was an homage to Jonathan, who's his closest friend, who also died in a motorcycle accident. Yeah.
What a tragedy.
Yeah, tragedy. This is a loss for the whole continent and the music industry of Africa.
It really is.
Yeah.
Well, we do want to send you off with a little pep in your step. So here is another music video. It's new, and it's from the DRC.
That's correct.
Yes.
Where everybody's waiting for Heather Maxwell to go and
right.
her shows.
I'm coming
You
soon,
should.
so watch out.
Yeah, exactly.
So why don't you tell us about this song?
So yeah, this song is Novelas. Novelas is the new release by Fabregas. Fabregas is a very talented artist, as you say, from the DRC. So they just released this new song that's really making you move.
I know.
Amazing.
That's why it's going to put pep in your step.
Exactly.
Now, there's one more thing. If you listen carefully, you're going to hear Roger Muntu name in this song. Like right away. Roger
Did you
Muntu.
really have to say that?
Yeah. So we got 2 stars here.
Hey, next time, Fabregas, if you're watching this, next time you better put Heather Maxwell on your song.
I won't say no. And that's our entertainment segment for today. Vincent, back to you.
Well, a lot of fun. Heather, thank you very much for that refreshing music. Now join Heather Maxwell again next Friday for another entertainment segment right here on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a great weekend.